Hello everyone and welcome to Ag Life. I am Gerard Lampow. Coming up on today's show, well, let's tell you all about it. There's some changes coming to the antibiotic protocol for livestock. As well, we have a conversation about surface rights in Saskatchewan, and we get a look at a mobile weather station. First though, let's roll off our events calendar with a look at events coming up in our various communities. To offer a story, well, producers across Canada are getting prepped for a change in how they get antibiotics for livestock. A local vet breaks it all down for us.
Antibiotics used to be available what we'd call over the counter, so you could go to basically anywhere, UFA, Co-op, PV Mart, and buy tetracyclines and also penicillin antibiotics. But actually come December 1st, 2018, the Government of Canada has made a change to that, and they'll only be available through your veterinarian.
As this change rolls out, Dr. Trent Wennekamp with the Lloydminster Animal Hospital says veterinarian oversight and the relationship with your vet is what is being stressed.
Mainly just so that you're not using them incorrectly, right? So that they're being used to treat the condition that they're meant to treat, that they're not being overused.
The change has been in the works for over a year. For consumers, there's always the concern about antibiotics getting into the food we eat.
All antibiotics have what we call a withdrawal date. So when they're used, the animal that has been given that antibiotic can't be slaughtered for a certain amount of time and put into the food chain. So one thing you often hear is, like certain foods are antibiotic free, or the no antibiotics have been used, which is true. But actually, all the food we eat is free of antibiotics.
Dr. Wennekamp stresses there's tremendous oversight and meat is tested before going to the consumer. The new antibiotic protocol takes effect December 1st and will further develop the relationship between vets and producers.
In many cases, it won't be that much of a change. Many people already have that relationship with their veterinarian, and all it will involve is just, having a conversation with them about what you're using it for and how you're using it. And so for many people, it won't be much of a change at all. But if you're someone that doesn't have that relationship with your veterinarian, you're going to have to establish that in order to obtain those antibiotics.
That change is coming into effect on December 1st. Still to come, a young producer is raising the issue of surface rights in Saskatchewan. And as well, we have a look at a mobile weather station. Ag Life continues after this break.
This segment of Ag Life is brought to you by Webb's Machinery. Webb's Machinery, your New Holland dealer in Vermilion, Vegreville, and Lamont.
Ag Life continues now, and my special guest is Scott Owens. He's been a grain producer all his life, and he was recently featured in Farmer's Voice, which is put on by the Agriculture Producers Association in Saskatchewan. So I've been having a look at the article that he's been featured in. It's called Surface Rights. So we want to have a chat with Scott and find out about his production and why surface rights is such an important issue that ag producers need to know about. So Scott, thank you for making the time to visit with us here.
Yes, thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
Tell me a bit about your operation.
We run a grain farm northeast of Maidstone. We have about 6,700 acres, and we grow soft white wheat, CPS wheat, canola, peas, barley, and oats.
Yeah, and you're a relatively young farmer, farming in the blood kind of thing?
Yep. My grandfather moved to Canada in the mid-20s, and then my dad took over the farm from him, and I've taken the farm over from my father.
That is awesome there. And you've basically got about 6,700 acres out there. How's the crop looking this year?
Really good.
Yeah.
We have a very heavy crop. It's a bit late. We're getting a little bit nervous that we may not get harvest started as soon as we'd like, but I think we'll have if everything comes off good, it'll be an excellent crop, I think.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, the big question that we need to understand is what exactly the surface rights entail, because like reading the article that you featured in, the legislation has not been updated for quite some time.
That's right. The surface rights legislation in Saskatchewan was meant to help oil companies and farmers cooperate. So in most cases, the oil under the ground belongs to the Crown, and the surface belongs to the farmer. So it's an old British common law principle that if I have, or let's say you have property and I own all the property around it, I can't prevent you from getting to your property. So that's the basic principle that surface rights is based on. So the oil under the ground belongs to the government, and the surface belongs to me. So I can't prevent the Crown from accessing their oil. So the Surface Rights Act gives oil companies produce the oil on behalf of the Crown. So the Surface Rights Act is meant to give oil companies access to the oil while still compensating the landowner fairly.
Yes.
That's the intent of the Surface Rights Act. Now, when it was written, it served the purpose very well, but a lot of things change over the course of 50 years. Oil production practices has changed. Agricultural practices have changed. The scale of oil and agriculture business has gotten much bigger, and it simply needs to be updated to reflect the new realities that are going on in the oil agriculture communities.
Yeah, and one of the things that folks would readily see, and there's been a lot of conversation about that, is what happens with abandoned wells and oil companies, for what number of reasons. Once the economy tanks, a number of these producers go out of business, and then it's up to the ag producers, because it's still their land.
That's right. It hasn't hit Saskatchewan real hard yet. Alberta has had some big issues with oil companies. Yeah, like you say, it's a volatile industry, so when the price of oil goes down, a certain number of companies go bankrupt. Now, if an oil well is still producing, the odds are very good that another company will come along and buy that producing well, because it still has value. But there's some wells that just quit producing oil in time. So those are the ones that are at risk. So if there's an oil well that's not producing, it has no value. It's actually a liability. So that's where the Orphan Well Association would come in. If a company goes bankrupt and can't clean up their own oil well site, then the provincial government has the Orphan Well Association, which has a fund of money available to them to go in and clean up the orphaned well.
Right.
Yeah.
So in terms of updating the legislation, Scott, what are some of the things that you would like to see as an ag producer, as a landowner? What are some of the things you think needs to be in there?
Some protection for the landowner. So in this case, if a company goes bankrupt and leaves an orphan well there, the farmer still has to farm around it. They're at a certain amount of risk of contamination and so on. So I feel there needs to be something in the Surface Rights Act to protect the landowner. Currently, if a landowner wants to do a rental review, so the oil company pays the farmer rent each year for the space they use, every 3 years the farmer has to approach the oil company to have a rent review. I think that should be the other way around. The oil company should approach the farmer and say, hey, we've been here 3 years, let's review the rent. put the onus on the oil company as opposed to the landowner. There's been a lot of talk that landowners would like to see flow lines, pipelines, also pay an annual rental. Currently, they don't. Pipelines run underneath the farmer's land, and there's kind of an upfront compensation, but there's nothing ongoing. And a lot of landowners see pipelines as hurting the production of the land and think that there should be ongoing compensation for that. Another issue is damages. So in the current Surface Rights Act, they have a maximum value that an oil company can pay a landowner for damages. So just as an example, let's say an oil tanker truck runs over your prize bull.
Wow.
And the farmer seeks damages. According to the Surface Rights Act, the maximum damages that they can pay is $1,000. And for a lot of the livestock in particular, it's worth far more than $1,000. So that's a prime example of how out of date the act is.
Yeah, because you said that it was his prized bull.
Yeah.
That's probably about 10,000 about there.
It sure could be.
Yeah.
But if they were going to follow the letter of the
Present
act,
legislation.
they couldn't, in theory, they couldn't pay any more than $1,000. So that's just a quick overview. There's other finer details that need to be updated, but those are some of the bigger issues that landowners have talked to me about and our organization about.
Yeah. So, Scott, where's the conversation? Where's the conversation on all of this at the moment? These are the things that farmers are saying to you, and these are some of the things that you are raising. Where are you taking this next? To the MLAs, to the ledge?
Yeah. I think there's been discussions with some of our local MLAs. Back in 2013, I think it was, the Lloydminster MLA, Tim McMillan, was the Minister of the Mines and Minerals or the Economy, I can't remember, but he initiated a surface rights review, and they invited landowners to give their opinions and so on what needs to change. And the provincial government introduced draft legislation changing a lot of the things we've talked about. And it looked good. APAS contributed, some other landowner groups contributed their thoughts and opinions. And the legislation was drafted up, written, it was ready, but about the time it was about to be passed, the price of oil went down, and the provincial government thought, this isn't the right time to introduce the legislation. And it's been sitting on the shelf ever since. So it's there, it's prepared. We're hoping to, our organization APAS is hoping to get in the door and talk to the Minister of Energy and Resources to say we'd like to see this passed. I understand the oil economy is still struggling, but it needs to happen sooner rather than later.
So you're feeling it is time to revisit that draft legislation and then see how you can move to get it passed there.
Exactly. Landowners, I think, are getting very frustrated with, in some ways, their lack of rights with regards to dealing with oil companies. And the oil industry does seem to be gaining some momentum and rebounding. So I think an opportunity will present itself soon to introduce this draft legislation.
Super. Well, we'll wait on that. We'll see how things develop and wish you best of luck, especially with harvest season and all of that, alrighty?
Thank you.
Our guest talking about surface rights issues in Saskatchewan, Scott Owens. He's a Maidstone ag producer for many years, and it's a real pleasure having him with us. Ag Life will continue after this break. Ag Life continues now. We're out in the field looking at a weather station that was put out in about May of this year. Karen Klemek is with AgLand here in Lloydminster. Karen, thank you very much for joining me out in this field here. Field of wheat it is.
That's right. Thanks for having me.
All right. Tell me about these weather stations.
So these weather stations are mobile stations. They go out within a week of seeding in the spring, and we leave them until after harvest. They're capable of measuring all sorts of weather parameters, everything from rain to your regular wind, air temperature. There's a soil moisture probe that goes down to a meter. There's a soil temperature gauge. There's a leaf wetness sensor, solar radiation sensor. And with those sensors, we can make all sorts of recommendations for producers on what to do in their fields for applications of sprays or when to put on fungicide or disease pressure, those sorts of things.
Perfect. So you can get a sense of certainly the health of the soil for one. Of course, it's powered by the sun. You've got a unit there that measures the sun units and so on. And I guess that's pretty good to know in terms of the sun energy that you need to get this field of wheat out of the ground there.
That's right. The sun's energy, of course, is needed for photosynthesis for plants to grow. And the more there is, the faster they grow. We can also use that to predict growing degree days for things like corn or soybeans or crops like that. And it also is really good just to know when our days are shortening and to prepare for the jobs ahead within the crop.
Right. Is there any particular aspect of this, Karen, that producers will say, I love that feature, I like that innovation, that I'm able to get that data, and that really helps me to plan my growing season better? Is there any one particular part of it?
I would say there's two unique things about this weather station compared to others. So the big one is the soil moisture probe, which reaches down to a depth of a meter, and it takes moisture readings at 10, 20, 30, 50, and 100 centimeters deep. So it allows us to see where the crops are drawing moisture from. The other thing that's really unique about it is that from that information in the soil probe, we can use it to predict yield. So it's basically a water-driven yield potential. Will give us an idea based on a yield goal where we are plus or minus from that yield.
Wonderful. And of course, inside it, you've got all the bells and whistles, the sensors that send the information up to the cloud, and it's the battery that is powered by the solar panel and so on. Just how much does this unit cost for a producer to get one?
So a fully powered unit right now is at about $10,000. However, these systems, John Deere has now partnered with Pessl, a top weather instrumentation company out of Austria, and they'll be providing our sensors and all of the instrumentation from now on, and it brings down the cost considerably. So a fully loaded system will be a lot shorter. It will also be a lot cheaper. So we're looking at probably between $5,000 and $6,000 fully loaded, and definitely a lot cheaper that if you just want your basic weather data.
Perfect. All right, we're going to wrap it up on that. I don't know if there's anything else, Karen, that we needed to let folks know about this awesome weather station here.
If you want to know more information about it or what it can do, come and see me at AgLand.
Perfect. Karen Klemek, the agronomist with AgLand here in Lloydminster. You're viewing Ag Life. We'll continue after this break. Ag Life continues now. Well, with the NAFTA hanging in the balance and the weather not pitching in, producers are battling to get the crop in and shut out some of these external factors. It's a good time to see how the markets are responding.
Strong prices and demand are the main features of cattle markets in 2018. Prices for calves heading into the fall are up 10 to 15 cents over last year, averaging about $2.25 for a 500-pound plus animal. Canadian beef demand is strong at home and abroad.
Year-to-date exports up another 5% over last year, which was a strong year as well.
Even with the external noise from the NAFTA negotiations and the revamped TPP deal that still needs ratification, beef is still bullish.
Our number 2 country for exports so far this year without the deal is Japan, up 19% so far in 2018. And you just kind of look at that data and say, how much better could that be if we continue to get more competitive access into some of those countries like Japan?
Hogs have been affected by NAFTA negotiations. Brian Perillat with Canfax is watching the African swine fever, which is affecting China and Eastern Europe, and whether that factors into hog prices. There's also the issue of feed.
The feed costs have been quite high. We've seen, if you got barley and feed barley's been, quite high, whether it's being exported to China or fed into southern Alberta. The only issue there is we're actually importing corn from the U.S. because it's cheaper.
Perillat weighs in on the crop side.
Canola has been fairly strong. Soybeans were hard hit with the China deal or on, the trade wars, call it what you will. So, those prices in the States dropped in places almost $2 a bushel. Canola's held in relatively well. The dollar's softened. We're in that $10.50, $11 range for, $11 into, deferred delivery stuff, which is okay, but there's still a lot of uncertainty.
The weather will remain a factor as producers try to get the crop in the bin. Back to cattle, while prices remain good, the dry conditions to the south and the price of hay is cause for concern. Producers may want to sell early.
I think there's been a lot of, early movement already, and if not actual physical movement, certainly pre-selling on some of these video and satellite sales. So selling your calves today for deferred delivery at today's price or at the price established today.
Overall, there's going to be pressure on the cow-calf market in the fall, and producers will need to seek alternative feed rations if they're not selling.
Well, looking at our next show, we'll have some information. How do you stay mentally healthy at this time of the year, given what's happening with the weather and crops still waiting to come on in there? As well, the Lloydminster Animal Hospital, they're having their equine information night, so we'll have an update on that. That's a wrap certainly for AgLife for this week. If you've got a comment or story idea, well, we'd certainly love to hear from you. And certainly you can check us out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Our email address as well is tvnews@newcap.ca, or you can simply send us mail, aglife@Newcap Broadcasting, 5026 50th Street, Lloydminster, Alberta, and our postal code is T9V1P3. I'm Gerard Lampow. We'll see you next time for all things ag.